University, and this is sponsored by the Alaska Pacific University Low-Residency MFA program. And so I would like to introduce our authors this evening. So this is an evening with Lily Tuzroyluke and Sarah Birdsall. And Sarah is going to be our first reader this evening. So Sarah is an award-winning journalist and the award-winning author of Red Mitten by McElroy and Blackburn, 2006. She teaches creative writing at the Matanuska-Susitna College branch of the University of Alaska and lives in her hometown of Talkeetna, Alaska. She drove down tonight to be with us, which is awesome. She is also the author of Wild Rivers, Wild Rose by the University of Alaska Press, which came out in 2020. The Moonflower Route by McElroy and Blackburn in 2017. Ghosts of Talkeetna, Northern Nights Press, 2013. And young adult book, The Moon and the Night, under the pseudonym Sarah Somebody, Northern Nights Press. And she is reading, so another hat that I wear is I volunteer with Epicenter Press and help with their acquisitions for Alaska writers. And Sarah is one of our Alaska writers, and she's going to read from her book that's coming out, is it this spring? I believe it's due out in the spring. It seems like so long by the time the books come out in the publishing world.
Forthcoming,
there we go. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk a little bit about her book and what she's going to read this evening.
Okay, thank you, and thank you all for coming. I'm going to read 2 chapters from my forthcoming novel. It's called Hill of Dead Horses. And I don't know how many of you might be familiar with the old Talkeetna or Curry site, which was north of Talkeetna, where there was a big hotel. Well, I kind of use that for an inspiration for this story, and it takes place in 2 time frames. In 1974, when everything is deserted up there, and I fictionalized it and changed the name of the setting because I needed to be able to mess with it, as fiction writers do. But it's inspired by the old Curry Hotel. And so 1974, when it's all kind of deserted, and then 1927, when it was a big flourishing hotel. And you'll know when I make the switch because I'll tell you. But just on the 2nd chapter, the character Sophia had just arrived there, and she was fleeing an abusive situation in a southeastern Alaskan Russian Orthodox village. And she's surprised by seeing her old longtime sweetheart there, who they did not have a good parting. So, okay. Dead Horse Hill received its name when a team of horses became frightened at seeing a bear, ran away and plunged to their death from the top of a steep hill. Nellie Neal Loing, Alaska Nellie. We didn't know about the horses, Thomas and I, back when we'd first arrived, but in the years since I have imagined them over and over, a black wet night, a grizzly bear in the dark, the stomping of the hooves and the screaming of the horses and the roaring of the bear. The day we stepped off the train, the only thing Thomas and I knew was that we thought Alaska would save us. The pure water, the clean air, the mountains and miles of trees, and miles of distance between us and San Francisco, the parties and the friends who encouraged us, the families who were shamed by us, the drugs and alcohol that consumed us. We walked away as if by leaving. The people we were stayed there and carried on as we once did, while the new versions of ourselves slipped off into a new life in a new land. But it doesn't work like that, does it? And of course, being who we were, we picked a spot already contaminated, a place of dead horses with ashes of destruction deep in the ground. Ashes, and worse. Emily Wells. Emily Wells, fall 1974. Thomas, what's this? I asked, looking unhappily at the length of whitish something that appeared in the post hole I was digging. Thomas was working on his own hole, diagonally across an imagined floor space from where I worked on mine. Thomas had this theory that it would be better to dig opposing corners first, then run a string between them, then do the same with the other corners, so we would end up with a perfect X that would equal a perfect rectangle. I wanted to do it the other way, the 2 front post holes, then the back, but really, neither of us knew what we were doing and relied on drawings in an old book on cabin building. Even on the hill, the black flies, which had appeared as soon as the mosquitoes started to thin out, were terrible. Rock, Thomas asked, still digging. No, a stick, I think, but it's across the hole and I can't get it to budge. Thomas put his shovel down and walked over the grassy, rock-riddled high country ground to my corner. He knelt beside my hole, his lanky frame folding like the hinged measuring stick we brought with us instead of a proper measuring tape. I watched his face as he evaluated the situation, his dark blonde waves plastered away from his forehead by sweat and bug dope, the beginnings of a beard sprouting from his round, boyish cheeks, dirt on the end of his nose. There was a clear sparkle in his blue eyes that made me say, yes, yes, we did the right thing. His brow furrowed. He reached down into the hole. Maybe you shouldn't touch it, I said, and his arm shot back up. Why? I don't know. We don't know what it is. He shrugged. Rock, wood, or bone, I suppose. Bone, I said, giving voice to the thought that had leaped into my mind from someplace unwanted. Well, if it's a bone, he said, it's got to be in animals. Moose, caribou, bear, they're all out here. He made a sweeping gesture with his arm. I pulled in a breath and looked at the view. The hills tumbled down to the river and the railroad tracks, between which was the ghost of what once was an elegant wilderness hotel that burned to the ground in 1957. From here, there was no sign of the ruin that bordered the rails that followed the river, but it bothered me that it was there, the remnants of a past that seemed so disconnected to the wilderness around us. There'd been a tennis court, a swimming pool, a small walking bridge across the massive glacial river. Alaska's elite, if there really was such a thing, rode the train up from Seward and Anchorage or down from Fairbanks with their skis and their snowshoes and their fishing rods and their wallets, stopping on their way through the center of Alaska, or coming specifically to experience the palace in the wilderness, as it was called. It's probably just a stick, Emily, Thomas said, knowing how my mind worked. It's got nothing to do with that old hotel. A caribou bone at the most. He reached again into the hole, his arm disappearing up to his armpit. You really went deep, he said. Wasn't I supposed to? Yeah, I guess. We'll have to check the book. If only I'd stopped, let the hole be deep enough a few shovelfuls ago. Then we would never have found the bone. Thomas's eyes roamed the gray sky as he felt away in the dark. It does seem like it's a bone, he said. Couldn't we just rebury it, I asked? I mean, if the hole is deeper than it needs to be, shouldn't we maybe cover it back up? But his hand was working under there, loosening the soil, and I could tell by his face that he'd gotten his stubborn on, that now he had to know. He bit his lower lip as he worked, face still turned to the sky, and I thought, Thomas, Thomas. I could not love him more than I did at that moment, my lost boy. We'll be okay. Then he pulled it free and brought it up. That thing, no, not a thing, a piece of a person. I could see it right away, from the days before Thomas when I studied to be a nurse. I felt that knowledge in my heart, my knees, and in the pit of my stomach. What had we found? Wolf, he said proudly, holding it up. Caribou? I stepped up beside him, tentatively touched it, then quickly pulled back my hand. What's wrong? Shadows were circling across Thomas's face now, shadows that I had no means to swipe away. No, it can't be, not way out here. It really looks like it, Thomas, a tibia. God, where was the rest of it? Then I added, trying to soften the blow, but I can't be sure. He sat down on the wild ground, dying grasses and twisted twiggy bushes dotted with hard, sharp rocks, placing the bone as far from him as his arm could reach, then went the hand that held it back and forth on a little patch of green moss. I lowered myself between him and the bone, grabbed his moving hand and held it tight in both of mine. His beautiful hand, with the fine, slender fingers and graceful bones, with the scars across the palm. The scars weren't there the night I met Thomas in a Sacramento club when he was a singer in a band and I was a nursing student, out with friends, not expecting my life to turn and not even wanting it to, really, though I had heard of the band and its singer, Thomas Findlay, whose voice had people talking all over the state. Someone like him was out of my reach, I had thought, though he looked like a rag doll up there on the stage as his voice flew through the room like a gliding bird. But when the band stopped for a break, Thomas came over to the bar near where I sat and ordered 3 shots of tequila. He downed 2, then turned his face toward mine. He smiled and was about to say something when he collapsed on the floor like a falling tree. I sprang toward him and knelt beside him. "I'm a nurse," I yelled to the press of people. It was almost true. "Give us room," what we needed, then and now. All the room in the world is what we thought we had. On this land we staked out ourselves on this hill in the wilderness that loomed above the site where that grand hotel had once sat incongruously between the great glacial river and these hills where caribou roamed. All gone now except the railroad stop and the name, Findlay, the same as my Thomas Findlay, and the same name as that bloody band, Findlay, that had gone on without him. As my eyes wandered to the bone on the tundra beside me, careful so Thomas wouldn't see me looking at it, I wondered if the hotel were really gone. In that moment, the 2 of us surrounded by raw beauty and not another human soul in sight, the bone and the ghost of the hotel seemed to be compressing the very air around us, and I heard those old words come back to me. Give us room. Sophia Peterson, fall 1927. This is how I died. I will start this journal there, on this day when I became Sophia again, brought back into a state of being the instant Jackson's eyes flashed onto mine. I am known again, and while that very fact may become the true end of me, I find a relief in it, like God has found me at last and insists Sophia Peterson still exists. For how long, I do not know. Once again, my fate is in Jackson's hands. It was my choice the first time, but him being here, how could I have foreseen such a thing? But I know how that is. It is not too wondrous. Very simple, in fact. A stranger in the village, who Jackson and I heard in the grocery, telling the clerk about this grand hotel to the north where the train pulls up right in front of the doors. "It's in the middle of the wilderness," the stranger had said, "along a massive glacial river. The hills rise up all around and they're loaded with moose and bears and caribou. I'd wager there's nothing like it on the planet. Findlay, that's what it's called, named after some California fellow." "How is the weather there?" Jackson had asked, and I suppressed a giggle. "As the Irish would say, grand. Grand like the hotel itself." "Sounds like a place then," Jackson said. We left the grocery, went down to the docks, and talked about it for the rest of the day. The great hotel in the great wilderness to the north. Then we forgot about it, or so it seemed. So much between that day and now. The day I died, was not the beginning, nor, it seems, was it the end. But as I crawled, beaten and bloody, along the windy beach in the darkness, the water from the rising tide reaching its arms toward me and nipping at my side, I thought it could be, that indeed perhaps it should be. But that animal instinct to survive stirred in me and pushed me forward until I found the old, deserted boat we had used for years now, the one that leaked and was not safe, but was on this night far safer than the shore. I found it, untied it from a tangle of driftwood, and pulled my battered body up into it. I rested for a moment on its cold, hard bottom. Then I found the paddle Peter and I had made together, and as the water lapped around it, I pushed with the paddle until the old boat was free from the shore. I thought I would just let the ocean take me. Of course, there's nowhere I could go that was close enough and far enough at once. But the will to live gripped me again, and as I sat in the little boat, rocking and recovering, I heard the ocean say to me, "You can live, Sophia, if you die." And I knew what the words meant, and I imagined myself free of Sophia Peterson and the whole village that stood against her, in some distant place, alive but not alive at once, and in that state somehow perhaps I could find a way to help Peter, or to at least know that he was well. He would grieve for me, but he would be spared, and he would be cared for. He would be free from the truth that makes my fingers tremble as I hold the pen, and which I know I should not write upon these pages. In the past, my journals had always been my friends. Where are they now? Will they be found and burned? But I no longer kept one after my mother's death. The story of my life had turned in a way I did not want to memorialize, though I feel it now, wanting to be told. Perhaps in the end I will have to burn these words myself in the fireplace of this great place. This place like a castle, something from a dream. Yet it lives in the same reality as the rainy island I come from, as the village that would never ever have me, though for so long I did not know why. Even after that great unveiling of truth, I did not truly know anything. But that first distribution alone was enough to set in motion my great undoing. Sophia, you mustn't ever. I only tell you this so someone knows someone, for Peter's sake. But as long as he lives, you must know nothing, Sophia, nothing. And you must not tell a single living soul, Sophia, you mustn't. My mother on her deathbed, the room rank with her diseased flesh, the unwashed sheets, the vomit in the bowl. Just us, Peter asleep. Father Mikhail finally back to his more comfortable lodgings in the village, though it seemed he would stay until the end, but his need for comfort and rest proved stronger than his determination not to leave my mother and me alone together. The kerosene lamp burned too high, the flame licking the glass globe, the wick in need of trimming and coating the globe with black silk. Burn it to the ground. That thought came to me in that moment, holding my dying mother's bony hand, the weight of her secrets transferred now to me. Take the lantern and throw it to the floor. Free my mother from the stink of her bed. Free myself from the awful knowledge she had given me. How could I possibly carry that with me, like a living thing buried inside my chest, pounding against my bones, crying to get out? The lantern could free us, free all of us, but I could not do that to Peter, and at that time I could not do that to Jackson. But I have stepped back further than I intended on these pages on this first night in my new lodging. I am warm, I am comfortable, and I have been fed. My ribs feel much improved, though my bruises have not faded, all hidden save for the yellow ovals on my throat, which I cover with an old bandana, Jackson's, which I'd kept in my skirt pocket, despite the feelings for him that had turned so painful. I'd remembered the bandana the night I died and pressed it against the cut on my forehead as it wept streams of blood. No sooner had I surmised that I would survive the beating than I felt the water deepening in the bottom of the boat. I bailed it with the rusty can we kept in there for that purpose, and knew that when the tide turned I would be lost to the open sea. That is when the idea came to me, and I began to paddle against the wind through the darkness to the point of the bay. Paddle, bail, paddle, bail. This is what I did, and soon I could make out the jagged silhouettes of the trees on the point. I knew I had to jump into the water before reaching the shore, and the thought terrified me. My skirt, thin and worn as it was, along with my old leather boots, might work together to pull me down. My ribs throbbed with pain, and I wasn't sure I could even swim. The temperature of the water would allow me no hesitation, no mistakes. It would take me as quickly as anything, but I must try. I told myself, if I can survive this night, then I can survive tomorrow, and perhaps after tomorrow I could survive another day. I stood on the rickety rowing seat and jumped, spinning down into the ice-cold water of the bay. It swallowed me. The freezing cold wrapped its claws around me. I would survive, or I would die. But Father McHale would not be the one who decides.
Thank you, Sarah. That leaves us plenty to be thinking about for the future. We look forward to that coming out in the spring. So I'd now like to take a moment to introduce Lily, and we will have time for question and answer at the end. We're going to do a little author talk as well. So I would like to introduce Lily Tuzroyluke, and so it's her debut novel, Tuzroyluke, but I believe you're reading from your new work. So exciting to hear that as well. So Lily is an Indigenous writer from Alaska and Canada, and the author of the novel Tuzroyluke, Ancestor. She is a graduate student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks and previously served in tribal government. Lily now resides in Anchorage, Alaska. With that, I turn it over to Lily.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing your writing. I absolutely love what I do. I love being here and listening to beautiful writing. This is, you're my test audience. I'm reading from my new work, which will be about a residential school in British Columbia. And I must warn you ahead of time that this story includes child sexual abuse, violence, and but these events actually happened in residential schools for Indigenous peoples. So please let me know what you think. March 4th, 1950. The man woke in a hospital bed with no memory of how he got into the room. There are bars on the window and a heavy metal door. He lifts off the blanket. He's wearing a navy wool cardigan over a thin hospital gown, paper thin, gauzy, and starchy. He feels naked and exposed. Before standing, he tries buttoning up the cardigan, only to discover the cardigan has no buttons. Upon kicking off the blanket, he sees he's wearing thick, woolly, pale green socks. He peels off the socks and tosses them to the floor. Besides his bed, on the floor, he finds loafers. He slips on the loafers, confused at their perfect placement on the floor, then clenches the cardigan closed with one hand and walks to the door. The door is locked. Outside the locked door is another locked door. He rattles the door, yelling, pounding. He sees no one. Hello? Anyone? An hour, it seems, he pounds at the door. He yells until his voice cracks. He circles the room, running his hand against the wall, searching for any weaknesses. He pushes and pulls at the bars on the window. The bars don't budge, not a whine or whisper. He spent nights in whorehouses smaller than this cell, a secret he kept after his ordination as a priest. He tears off the pinstripe sheets of the bed, lifting the stained, blemished mattress, seeking hidden objects, nothing hidden in the bed. The walls are mint green. He hates the ice cream colored room, mint green, like the wool socks he found over his feet. Pistachio, fake green, unnatural. He imagined it once was a brilliant mint green, but now the walls are warped, curvy, and flaking in small dusty piles like confetti. Taped to the wall are hand-drawn charcoal drawings. He knew he didn't draw them. He never drew a creative stroke in his life. This he knew. But the artist captured the memories. A brick building with an iron fence, a boy's face, rounded, high cheekbones, and thick eyebrows. An Indigenous child of Canada, a fellow priest standing at an altar holding a Bible, who he recognizes as Father Otto. Beside his bed is a silver breakfast tray crammed with mauve plastic plates and bowls. He was given eggs, toast, orange juice, coffee, no cream or sugar, pack of cigarettes, ashtray, and matches. He drinks the orange juice in one long drink, dribbling juice down his chin, he picks up soggy scrambled eggs with his fingertips and looks out the window. Outside, a single dusty road built through a grove of trees against low mountains in the distance. A black iron fence surrounds the entire building, at least as far as he can see. Cars arrive and cars depart from a locked gate, guarded by a bulky uniformed gateman. The uniformed gateman stops every vehicle, speaks, flips pages on a clipboard, marking lists with a pen he keeps stuffed in his shirt pocket. Between vehicles, he sits in a small building a little bigger than a shack. He surveys his own body. Am I much older, he asks himself. Other than the familiar aches in his left knee and left hip, injuries he sustained from the mountains, he couldn't ascertain his own age. 60 years old, he thought, I must be 60. He opens his cigarettes, lights a match, lights his cigarette, extinguishes the match and sits, crosses his legs in an exaggerated position, inhales, exhales, and thinks he must look like a woman smoking, like a downed woman, he says to himself. How can a man be masculine with this tall bed, with this height? He straightens his back, sitting erect, manning up his face ready, waiting for anyone to appear at the front door. By lunch, he didn't care how he looked or appeared. He crouched down to the floor like a child, curling forward and knees against his chest. He tapped his palms against his forehead, trying to conjure any memories of this place. Think, remember, he said to himself. A doctor looks in the door, guards on each side of him. He speaks to the guards. The man can't hear any of their words, just muted vowels. He knows he is a doctor by his authority. He gives instructions to the guards. The doctor is Middle Eastern, dark-skinned, healthy, vibrant, glowing, thick curly hair pulled back in a ponytail. In a flurry, the guards unlock the heavy doors. They carry in a folding chair for the doctor. The guards leave together, standing at the door facing away. Hello, Sheldon. Good morning. The doctor smiles, grabs the chair with one hand, the legs scraping against the cement floor. He sits, crossing his legs, smiling, ready to work. This is a travesty, an outrage. I thought I was going to die. What if no one came? What if I was left here to die like an animal? Have you not read the notebook? I see, it's under the breakfast tray. I'm sorry, Sheldon. This should have never have happened. I'll remind Ellen. She's the meal patron. I'll remind Ellen to be mindful of your notebook. Where am I? Yes, of course, all the answers are in your notebook, but no matter. You have no short-term memory as a result of brain damage. You can remember your childhood, adulthood, some more recent events, but you can't retain new memories since your incident, since your brain injury. What accident? What injury? I've had no injury. This is a conjurer's trick, a sham. You're drugging me for what? What is this place? The doctor isn't shaken, he's steady. His blue striped button-up shirt and navy trousers are crisp, no wrinkles, ironed with care. Instead of cufflinks, he folds his sleeves up to his elbows, showing tan arms. The doctor lowers his voice with care. Sheldon, you are accused of murder and pedophilia, among other crimes. 6 months ago, while awaiting trial, you were raped by several prisoners, some even say by guardsmen. The lacerations from your anus to your middle back required 27 stitches. Sheldon feels his spine. He stands looking out the window, feeling the smooth, scarred skin on his back. Outside, the staff is changing shifts. The morning shift to the evening shift. Cars arriving, cars leaving. Men and women arrive with their lunch pails and coffee tins. You don't have cufflinks. I must take them off before seeing patients. A precaution. Right, Doc. Can't risk a patient finding a cufflink. Heaven forbid a cufflink. I sense your sarcasm, but we have to make sacrifices for our jobs. A small inconvenience in order to visit my patients. Where are you from? Toronto. I mean, where in the world? India. My roots are in India, but I've never been there, never have my parents. Have I asked you this before? You ask me every day I see you. Is this how I spend my days locked up alone? We're working on integrating you, Sheldon. That is my wish. We're working on this together. Am I integrating? You've done well enough with fellow adult patients. This is true, but as for the pedophilia, we've just begun our treatment. Sheldon cringed at the word pedophilia. He didn't like the word or how it's pronounced, how people tended to overemphasize and elongate the word. Those are accusations, pure accusations. Sheldon, we've had this discussion in great lengths. To some degree, you've confessed your slippage into pedophilia. I'm your doctor and sworn to work towards your healing. I ask for your honesty. The doctor wrote on his notepad, and without looking and with 2 fingers, he waved in a nurse and 2 patrons. Do you feel rested? Do you feel as if you got enough rest? I don't know, what is happening? What are they doing here? This is the latest science, a breakthrough in psychiatric care. LSD therapy. Doctors theorize patients connect with their innermost self. They no longer fear their own demons. You mean drugs? You're drugging me. LSD is a hallucinogen, non-addictive. The courts are discussing the lobotomy, a new treatment. But if the courts can order a procedure remains to be seen. Personally, I see the lobotomy as barbaric, but they've encountered incredible success rates, mucking around in the sphere of the human brain. The more we know, the more we figure out how much we don't know. A nurse arrived in thick white squeaky shoes. 2 male black patrons stood at her side, also dressed in white. She smiled at him, teeth stained red with her lipstick, a nurturing smile like her grandmother. Let me check your blood pressure, hon. Stay still for me. It's nothing but your blood pressure. Good. Very good. Now your temperature. Everyone remembers getting their temperature taken, don't they? She flicked the thermometer, crisp, confident, while continuing to smile. She jotted down his vitals in a file which she handed to the doctor. The 2 patrons stood on each side of his bed. With the jolt, the bed clicked down to a lying position. They strapped him down with thick leather straps. What is this? A precaution, dear, for our workers. We have to think of our patients and our workers. Humor Jim and Adolphe for me. Let them do their job so they can go home. What you got for me, Doc? She stood over his clipboard looking at his notes, body touching his body. He was startled by the touch, uncomfortable. She felt fluffy and light, and he was disgusted by the personal intrusion. The previous dosage worked. Let's maintain the same dosage and see how we do. He pointed to the prep medicine on the tray, went to get her to step away. She held the needle to the light, tapped and jammed Sheldon's arm. She patted his upper arm, smiling at the doctor and patrons. The patrons unstrapped him. The room emptied. Sheldon watched the sunlight move from left to right, downwards to upwards, all the while his stomach glowing with happiness. Ecstasy radiated through his body like sea currents. He laughed, savoring every sea crest. Hey, Doc, this is my treatment. I'm happier than a skipper in a boat. Happier than fish away from the hook. You there, Doc? He wiggled his legs and yelled. Off in the distance, he heard singings of tiny bodies, happy and joyous singing, but from tiny bodies like mice, cartoonish singing. His white bedding looked strange. He flopped his heavy head downwards to his chest, and the bedding expanded, grew, stretched farther than the horizon, vast like ripples of sand dunes. Little peoples rose up from the white bedding, like the ripples from the ripples of the dunes, singing in unison, and he laughed. If he could clap his hands, he would clap his hands. They jumped and cartwheeled and juggled and sang in their squeaky mouse voices. They battled each other with wooden swords and wooden pikes, jests, each falling down to the ground in pretend death with exaggerated falls. The hospital patrons opened the door, entered, then the nurse. All 3 staff members glided in long coiling snakes of themselves, a dozen replicas of themselves, each replica bleeding into the other, blots, dyes, and molds. He told them of the little peoples on his bed. The patrons propped up his bed at a slight tilt. When the doors shut with a volcanic boom, the little peoples jumped in unison. When they landed on their feet, their nails turned black and grew and grew and grew. They raised their hands up into the air with their long nail claws, and the walls started oozing black tar. He guffawed, covering his mouth, still laughing, still in ecstasy. Tar dripping down the walls, gooey black, yet shining as a mirror. He saw his own reflection, sitting in a reclining position, strapped down at the waist, hospital gown, messy hair, half beard. Little peoples didn't sing anymore. They held pikes in their hands. A river, he whispered. He knew he was on a river. The bed jerked forward like a train ready to depart. He tried shaking them off, jerking his legs, kicking his legs, swatting them away like insects. Fast they are, he thought. Fast we are, they said in unison. The bed floated at first, floated down a wide stream, bumping along. The tarry river is burning lava. He screams about the lava. Will he burn up? Will the bed burn up? Somehow he is safe from the lava. Church, he's a grown man. All the people, oh sorry, excuse me, I lost my spots. This is a draft. Listen, hold on just a second. It is his home as a child. He sees details he's forgotten. The checkered and moth-eaten curtains above the kitchen table, the graying walls, the holes along the walls chewed open by mice and shrews. I'm sorry, I just clicked something. Okay, sorry, I lost the part, and like I said, this is my draft. So he's in this river, and he's come across like this dollhouse as he's hallucinating. Church, he's a grown man, all the people are standing. Preacher, nuns, indigenous students, he stands in the far back, he stands in prayer. They stand singing hymns. Sheldon sticks his hand down a boy's pants. The boy doesn't say anything, the boy doesn't move. The boy holds his songbook in his hand, singing stiff and not moving. Lies, it's all lies. Truth, it's all truth, they say. This is the house of the Lord, house of the Lord, they say. House of the Lord, they continue. The nuns start walking in a circle, chanting, dancing, three crucifixes to their chests, hitting themselves with whips, holding up their swords to expose naked bodies underneath. At some point, they toss away their clothing, naked women, naked nuns, keeping their habits on their heads, stoking each other, kissing each other. Somehow he knows a young child waits for the nuns within the circle. He knows the child fears the nuns. He knows the child was chained to a bed, and nuns take turns on the child between the legs of the young girls, licking, lapping, pleasuring themselves. The bed moves along to a schoolyard overgrown with tall grass and weeds. He chases a small boy running, tripping, looking back at Sheldon, gaining on the small figure. He grabs the boy by the hair and he crashes backwards into the tall grass. He forces the boy to his knees. Stop, doctor, nurse, lies, it's all lies. Truth, it's all truth.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Lily. We'll look forward to that coming out. So I'd like to take a moment to invite Sarah and Lily to talk about their sources of inspiration. So I don't know if one of you would like to go first. Step back this way. And just talk about, like, both of you write, so both of them are historical fiction. settlers in Alaska. So I'd like to sort of hear a little bit more about that, as I'm sure others would.
Yeah, you wanna go ahead? Well, I'm always inspired by Alaska, and I've lived in Alaska since I was 8 years old, and I've known a lot of interesting Alaska characters and lived in some beautiful spots. And for example, my previous novel, Wild Rivers, Wild Rose, was inspired by all these stories I heard growing up in the Talkeetna area of the Cache Creek murders and then the Murder Lake murders. And I kind of mashed them all together in my head, but it was really, the murders were just like something I could focus on while I was trying to do all these other things with just kind of celebrating the Northern Susitna Valley. And it's, I think of it as my ode to the Northern Susitna Valley. And for this current book, I'd always been fascinated by the idea of this huge hotel just up the tracks from Talkeetna. And now it's just, there's nothing there except maybe some old, if you dig around, you can find old doorknobs in the soil. So that's really what influences me is Alaska, and I figured out a long time ago I was a regional writer. And that's what I do. But Lily, I would like to ask you how you came up with the idea for your ancestor book.
Yeah.
If I could.
Oh, absolutely, that'd be great.
What inspired you for that?
Yeah, thank you so much. So it actually began when, as a Tlingit story. At the time I was living in Skagway. Before I became a writer, I worked for tribal government, and that's really what I wanted to do when going to college. As a young person, I wanted to work for like the Native villages or the IRAs. You might know them as tribal council or traditional council. And so I was working for the traditional council in Skagway, and I decided I want to write a story. I want to write a story, and I want it to be around an Indigenous child. And so it actually began. I was considering the gold rush era because, of course, gold rush is really popular in Skagway, especially. And but then I had the opportunity to work for, I was working for a tribe, the Tlingit tribe, which is not my tribe. I got the opportunity to work for my tribe in Point Hope. And I took that job, and I tried to do some writing while I was there, and the inspiration was just, the inspiration just came naturally from whaling captains and elders and hunters, because there's just so much subsistence activities that still happen there. I got to hear elders that would come to the council meetings, and they would testify against EPA, or no, excuse me, the Red Dog Mine, and maybe some other government agencies there, and they would say this is going to affect our drinking water. And there was one pivotal moment where this elder stood up. His name is Luke Kunuk, and he said, my wife died 2 weeks ago, and the last thing that she said to me was, never stop teaching the young people. And it was so, those kind of moments, those kind of like heavy moments, kind of really stuck with me for the story. But of course there's a lot of research
a lot of research that was done. Yeah, I do keep a cheat sheets and an Excel spreadsheet, which I have in my writing prompts, and then I have like a cheat sheet that I like to reference when I'm doing my free writing. Yes, and yeah, I think the people take that really. And thank you for your patience on my draft. Yeah, like I said, this is I was hesitant to share because it's in the very beginning process, but you'll be able to see how I progress, how I add in more of the details and descriptions.
So I think at that, do we have any questions? Because I find that you know, that you did so much research for that, and I feel like you had to have done some research on yours too. I'm very lucky working for Epicenter Press, getting to see the manuscripts when they come in, and knowing and respecting the work that goes into them. It's just an amazing process. So I don't know if you want to talk at all about that, or if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask.
I do. So Lily, can you explain, like, when my husband talks about, or my father-in-law talks about story, can you explain your process of listening to your elders and your ancestors, and how you take their information, their inspiration through talk story, and how you have to listen to get where you are?
Yeah, into the written word. Okay, yes, that is, I understand what you mean. You don't want to copy the exact story that they told, but there are some elements in stories that are fact. Just like in I don't know, ethnographies or archaeologists' studies. You take what is fact from that, and I take that information, like traditional knowledge, and weave that into the stories. But I understand what you mean. How there's some really great like creation stories. Those are things that I try to stay away from. The exact stories, because I've seen that before. People have said, well, that's our people's story. So I try to take just the elements that I know are facts, that are traditional knowledge, and weave them into my own fiction story.
And do you have any other works that you're working on, either of you? Because I know yours is just about to come out, and this is your work in progress. Do you have any other ideas of things that you're working on?
I'm currently trying to return a bit to short story writing. So I've been working on short stories, but I do have another novel, a draft of it completed, that I'm just kind of sitting on. It's one I've been struggling with, and I'm trying to capture the 70s in this area north of Talkeetna, where there were a bunch of hippies living and a lot of interesting things happened. And it ended up, I did one draft of it that I thought, I had a story in mind that I wanted to tell, and I stubbornly stuck with that through like 3 different drafts, and then I just realized that I was just forcing it too much. I just couldn't make that story work. But I kept all the characters in the setting, and I threw in some angel dust, and everything goes haywire. So I don't know if it's any good or not, but it was interesting to rewrite it. And we see what you're doing.
Yes. As I said, this book is going to be about residential schools, and it starts off with the the perpetrator. But afterwards, we'll move into the story of the indigenous children, and I will give it away because you'll know before, is that the children will help catch him and bring him to justice. And so it will be an interweaving, and there's a lot of research and that is done with that. I tend to like ethnographies, some of these first historians that came to Alaska, for example, Ernest Birch, I think, Frolic and Rainey, some of these, because I tend to like, I can visualize their data, I conceptualize their data better. So it's a learning process. It's a learning process. I lived there for a time. It's British. I'm part Nishka, from British Columbia, and I lived there for a time. But I don't have the same kind of knowledge that I have about Alaska Native people that I do of the indigenous people of British Columbia. So it's I'm building from the ground zero on up. So it's starting with I'm researching the indigenous peoples of the area. Potlatches were banned until like 1950, and you were required by law to send your child to residential schools. There was agents called the Indian agents that would go to the villages and like travel around and make sure all the children are going off to residential school. And it's based in Chilliwack, BC, which is the same, it's based on the same residential school that my grandfather went to. So some other research, trying to find these court cases where priests have been brought to justice, which is really hard to find. Looking at Alaska, it's mostly they had just moved their priests to someplace else, so they would send them to like treatment rehab. But it's so hard to find anything that's in newspapers or in court documents, and looking up the judicial system in Canada, because a big part of it as well will be in the courtroom. Yeah. But let me know. Thank you for letting me be my test audience.
Do we have other questions, perhaps?
I just wondered, for either one of you, do you ever find that you're writing along in a chapter and you realize that one of your characters has been writing his or her own stuff while you've been sitting there? Do any of them take over? Have you noticed?
I definitely have had that happen before, and sometimes it's a blessing and sometimes it's a curse, depending on, if the story starts going another direction. I was working on one novel for, years back that I never totally finished, but this one character, he was supposed to be a minor character, he just totally took over, and I realized it's because I liked him so much that I liked spending time with him, so I just kind of let him go haywire in the book, and someday I'll pick it back up and bring him back to life and see what happens. How about you?
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. I love dialogue, and it's a good way to break up parts of the story, and sometimes a person can describe a situation much more, can describe situations and it's descriptive and it works well for the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do like
question for
Absolutely.
Lily, and, I've recently read your book, as I said, and one thing that struck me right away was that the plot is just genius. I mean, how could someone start that book and not want to finish it? And I'm wondering how you came up with that. Are there stories of whalers kidnapping children and?
There are, and, yeah, it definitely wasn't, I definitely didn't come up with the plot, with the, storyline all in one sitting, definitely, just, the more research that I did, the more ideas, I was like, maybe we can have it this way, but yes, unfortunately, there were, whaling ships that had children aboard, and I did find the accounts of that. A lot of my research for Tuzroyluke was whaling and whaling ships, and I read some accounts. But yeah, it's more of figuring it out as you go along, and most of it is once I've done the research and it seems more feasible. Like their travel, they traveled a long ways, overland, and what I researched is there were some people that were traveling on fat bikes from Kivalina to like Utqiagvik. And they did there's a whole story series on their trek, and so they put how many miles and they put how many days, and so I did like the subtraction, like how many miles can they do in a day then, and then also combining that with what I've heard, how far dog teams can go. Of course, it wouldn't be as fast as I did rock, but 30 miles seems, and then I was like, wow, 30 miles does seem like it can be done because it has been done. So I went with that, and so at some point, I thought, well, maybe they're traveling across land, but can that be done? And so I had to find maps, and there's a funny story of how I found my maps. I couldn't find any maps that had like the elevation I needed, because I was tracking their journey all the way across the Arctic slope. And I thought, well, they'd probably be traveling by these rivers, and how would they go exactly? And I couldn't find any maps. Like all the maps in the bookstores were like road atlas, like, yeah, so it was like, I couldn't find anything. And then I was at recycling, and I looked in the recycling bin and I saw some maps.
Oh my God.
in the bins, and I was like, I knew that there would be good maps because they were like, I don't know, the Department of Oil and Gas or something, like old surveys or something. And I was like, am I really gonna go in there and get these maps? And I did. And so I was like, just do it, just get in there. So I had to, so I mapped them, and then I was like, this is doable. This is something that can be done. And I was really excited to see that, that yes, that travel could have, with the rivers and the way it flows from west to east. Yeah, so it's a journey. Finding the storyline.
Do you have a time frame that you're working on for the new book?
Oh no, not yet. Gosh, I I ambitiously told myself by the end of the year, but it's already October.
How about the setting of the story? What time period would the setting of the story you plan to tell?
Oh yeah, 1950. 1950, and I was kind of going towards this area where the lobotomy is just coming about, and then also LSD treatments is coming about. Yeah.
Hopefully your story will have a padlock. because they were banned and then now they're not.
Right.
So that's,
There we go. Yes, that is a great idea. Yes.
hopefully not, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I would like to thank you all for joining us, and particularly Lily, Sarah, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
out this evening and sharing your work with us. It was
And you will be
fabulous.
at Writer's
Two.
Block tomorrow night, right?
Yes.
Both of you?
Oh,
Yes.
Writer's Block?
Yes, writers.
Oh.
Writer's Block tomorrow.
You wanna talk about that real quick?
It starts at 6, right? And, we're going to be discussing with, Lori Townsend, and I forget the fellow's
David G.
name.
Brown, I believe.
Okay, yeah, and we're gonna be discussing seeing Alaska through the lens of fiction,
Okay.
Oh, very good topic.
and talking about our collective histories in Alaska, and so it should be fun.
Yes.
Are they gonna video that at all, or share that?
I don't know, I can ask, I don't know if they can, I
Okay.
could call tomorrow and see if they can arrange for that, that'd be great.
That would be great. Oh, that would be great.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.